Shalom, friends. We are often told in this country, well, if you don't pick this guy, the other option is the other guy, and he's just so much worse. Pick the lesser of two evils. What happens when the first guy is hell-bent on destroying the country by turning it into his own dictatorship, and the second guy, maybe not so hell-bent because he's just not cognizant enough to know what he's doing? That's the situation we are currently in today, friends, as I would like to demonstrate for you on this episode of The Watchdog. Thank you very much for joining me. Good evening, friends, and shalom, and welcome to this episode of The Watchdog, hosted exclusively on the Synagogue News. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are indeed living in biblical times. Want to go ahead and say shaloms all around anybody who's watching this live. If you're watching this after the fact, I did not forget about you. It's just that you're not currently here with me today. So shalom to you after the fact, though, of course, for you, this will be present. So, yeah, there's a little bit of that. We have a very interesting program to get to today, but obviously have to go through some channel housekeeping. So, first and foremost, I want to remind you guys, please do like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live, which when we're consistent, which has been very rarely recently, but I'm going to try and get better at that, is Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 p.m. It's not always necessarily live. Sometimes I have to pre-record because I do work on Thursdays, but nevertheless, 10 p.m. Mountain Time, Tuesdays and Thursdays is when we try to air these, while also, occasionally airing interviews, debates, and Watchdog special reports on Wednesdays. If you're interested in any of that, like I said, please do like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. Remember that you can give any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature in the comment section down below. I will try to answer any questions which are asked sincerely. Please do remember to follow us on various social media platforms. I am currently on Twitter, Gab, Facebook, Minds, Instagram, Telegram, and MeWe at the tag The Synagogue. Oh, and also Truth Social at the tag The Synagogue. If you're interested in following me any of those places, please do so, and also get this video shared to those social media websites if you do frequent them. I certainly do appreciate that. We want to remind you guys to please follow us on the Rumble account. We talk about very controversial things on this channel, and we all know YouTube is not very fond of controversial topics, especially conservative political commentary, such as what you're going to see today. So if you want to make sure that you get any episodes which are deleted, or that you have the ability to follow us in the event that the channel gets deleted, please do consider subscribing to our Rumble account. It is not the Synagogue News. It is at the tag The Synagogue. Unfortunately, I have to pay to get it changed to the Synagogue News, but we do post Synagogue News content exclusively there, and I would highly recommend any of you guys who are interested support us over on that channel. We don't go live there, but we do post these videos on that channel after the fact. And you're supporting the fight against big tech and our internet overlords who would like to censor all of our speech, who would like to push the AI monstrosities that are currently coming for our jobs, for our art, for our theology, for our very lives in the sense of our human spark. And you're supporting conservative, free speech advocating people. And of course, the capitalist system, which I think is very important in that you're supporting competition, fighting back against monopolies. So very, very, very many reasons for you to support us over on Rumble, and I certainly hope that you do so. You can financially support us if you like the work that we do here by subscribing to the Patreon. If you subscribe, I believe it is $5 monthly. It might be $10. You get access to the Bloglodite blog, which has gone on hiatus for a while, but we are hoping to get it back up in a minute. Nevertheless, those of you guys who do want to support for $10 monthly, I am trying to get you guys something in return for that. or if that's the only reason you want to do it, it's not necessarily for the support, then, of course, you can do that as well. Or that's another reason to do it is what I mean. Sorry. But if you just want to support us because you like the work that we do, you appreciate the journalistic integrity that we bring here, anything of that nature, then please do consider following us on Patreon. While there is a tier to have access to Blogladite, you can give as much or as little as you like. You don't have to give in one of the tiers. And in fact, I think that's the only tier I actually have at the moment. So there is that to consider as well. You can also give a one-time donation if you're not interested in subscribing to the Patreon via my PayPal. Information to all of that stuff is not currently in the description below, but it will be given, or it will be placed in the description below after this video is posted. And for those of you guys who are watching this live who would like to give, please do let me know in the live chat, and I will make sure to send you guys a link. Our date today is May the 7th, Tuesday, May the 7th, 2024. We'd like to do a little this day in history, so let's go ahead and do that. There's actually two pretty interesting things I wanted to let you guys know about. Number one, May the 7th is actually when Vladimir Putin officially became the president of Russia. He had been president of Russia since December 31st, 1999 in an interim state. But it was on May the 7th, 2000 that he was actually legitimately elected, legitimately inaugurated. He'd, of course, already been elected, the president of Russia. And really, in a way, he's never actually looked back since then. There was a small period of time between 2008 and 2012 where he was no longer the president. But most people, myself included, tend to think that the president who was sitting at that time was really nothing more than a Putin puppet. He was the prime minister. Putin was, during that time. And at the time, it was because the Russian constitution said you couldn't serve more than 2 consecutive terms, which is why he ended up leaving. Terms back then were 4 years. They have since been extended. And of course, he's been president this time around since May the 7th, 2012. So that's very interesting. May the 7th, 2000 is when we officially saw a President Putin. He had been prime minister for President Boris Yeltsin a little bit before that, but nevertheless. Another thing that I found very interesting, May 7th, 1864 was actually the last day of the Battle of the Wilderness. The reason I find that particularly interesting, other than the fact that I'm a history nerd and specifically a Civil War nerd, is just the fact that May the 7th, 1864, and really the entire battle, which took place from May the 5th to May the 7th, 1864, and really the entire Overland Campaign, which was the greater campaign of 1864 in Virginia between Generals Grant of the Union and Lee of the Army of Northern Virginia, they really demonstrate something that I think is important for us to be able to say, which was that Lee was a very good general and that he was probably a superior tactician, not only to General Grant, but to anybody else who was fighting on the Union side. Now, of course, you might say, okay, well, why is that important to say? It's just nothing more than a military opinion, right? Well, the reason it's important to say is because in the modern age, those who control the history books, much like they control the internet, control the language, control whether or not we can define gender as it's been traditionally understood, so on and so forth. Well, they also control the history books. And they have been trying to push a narrative that's saying things like what I just said, that Lee was a great tactician, a great general, probably superior to Grant, that he beat Grant as far as the tactics of the thing you're concerned. In every single engagement they ever actually fought in, they would consider that to be lost cause revisionism and would consider me to harbor perhaps some white nationalist views for having said that. Now, of course, I don't harbor white nationalist views. In fact, I have Jewish blood. They wouldn't accept me if I wanted to, right? And on top of that, while I do think that there is a middle ground between modern historians and the lost cause revisionists, I do not subscribe to the lost cause theories, right? Very many of them are often wrong. Like, for example, they'll say the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It's obviously not true. It definitely did, right? But the problem is, if you say it was more complicated than simply slavery, if you say that the South had superior commanders, at least in the Eastern Theater, and was overwhelmed by the amount of manpower and supplies and so on and so forth that the Union had, if you say Lee or Jackson or Jeb Stuart, who's actually a far back ancestor of mine, that these guys were superior to their Union counterparts like Grant or Meade or Philip Sheridan or so forth, they think saying these things make you a revisionist and make you a white supremacist, a closeted white supremacist, right? And this is, of course, nonsense. And the reason that this is important, friends, is because we are entering into an era in history where we're losing history, where those who control history, and I know I'm going to sound a little bit conspiratorial when I say this, but I think we all know this is true. Look at the Confederate statue thing as an example of this, which, by the way, as us conservatives predicted, did not end with conservative statues. They're now vandalizing World War I statues in Colombia, but I digress. The people who control history are trying to paint a narrative that fits their current socio-political agenda, right? So the framers and the founders of this country, they're all no good racists. Why? Well, because we don't want to say there's any credence we need to give or credit we need to give to the Constitution. The Southerners were obviously evil. Why is that? Well, first off, we want to belittle, quote unquote, podunk middle America. Secondly, we definitely want to belittle the idea of secession and also states' rights, which does not necessarily mean secession, of course. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. We want to attack and belittle the reformers. Why? Because they were divisive. They were certainly religiously intolerant. And while we certainly don't want to glorify these men and mythologize them because they're just human beings like the rest of us and history is complicated, we mustn't let the liberal media, the liberal academia, the liberal intelligentsia, the liberal world order, which exists in the macro across the world and in the micro here in the United States, take control of our history in such a way that 100 years from now we won't recognize it, neither will truth. If truth does not recognize your history, it's because it's not actually your history. It's a fiction that has been painted by people who want you to have a certain opinion about history. Okay? And so it's very important that we be guardians of history, just as it is very important that we be guardians of the Constitution, of our religious beliefs, of the rights that we have had passed down via our ancestors, of our cultural traditions, and so on and so forth. These things, history is our attachment to our ancestors. We must not lose it. And with that, my little rant off of the fact that this is May 7th, 160 years after the last day of the Battle of the Wilderness is over. So we have a couple of different things to talk about, and I want to try and keep this at least somewhat close to an hour. We'll probably go a little bit over because we always do. Before we get to the actual articles, I did want to briefly address something that has reared its ugly head on Twitter yet again, and it rears its ugly head in conservative podcasting circles quite frequently, and that is an issue that none of you probably care about, which is the pit bull issue. For some reason, once every 2 to 3 months, conservative media gets a bug in their ass, excuse my French, and decides that they want to just collectively say, oh, we hate pit bulls, they should be made illegal, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Now, I don't personally own pit bulls, okay? Never personally owned a pit bull. My little brother did own one for a very short period of time, but it was actually his roommate's, and so when his roommate ended up moving out, then the dog ended up leaving with him. It's my only actual experience with a pit bull since, in the last 20 years almost. It was a perfectly sweet dog, total spaz. So this isn't something that's like a personal thing for me when I say this, right? But I want to call out conservative media on this issue because, number one, it makes conservatives look exactly like the left thinks they look, right? When you there's a Shane Gillis joke. For those of you who don't know, Shane Gillis is a comedian. There's a Shane Gillis joke in his most recent special, at least I think it's his most recent special, but I've seen it, where he talks, he says that the process to becoming a conservative is very slow, and he makes a joke about his dad, who's a Fox News dad, as he puts it, who says, you think my dad just woke up and said, oh, I want to be a prick about everything, right? And then, of course, the crowd laughs because that's the way people see conservatives. We're fogies. We're pricks about everything. We want to control people, all this other kind of stuff. You want to control a woman's right to reproduce. You want to control marriage. You want to control whether or not we smoke pot. You want to control this and that and the third and so on and so forth, right? And, of course, the reality of the situation is conservatism, while we have a heavy emphasis on hierarchy and law and order, and more so depending on what political philosophy you adhere to. I myself am a Burkean style traditionalist for the most part, of course. Everybody's a mix of stuff. But conservatism actually is very much grounded in the Constitution, very much grounded in the rights of man, very much grounded in localized governments and state governments and family units and individuals' ability to govern themselves, and on checks and balances for each one of those units, and of course the federal government as well, right? So the exact opposite of what we are often painted as is actually true. But every now and then, conservative media decides to make it sound like we actually are those people by talking about things which frankly don't matter, right? Whether or not pit bulls are banned or not, they should not be, by the way. Whether or not they're banned or not in your local municipality has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not we're going to prevent World War III tomorrow, or reduce the national debt, or the government's going to come for our guns, or whether we can actually end the massive holocaust of babies that has led to, I think, something like 65 million at this point, babies being killed via what we euphemistically and disgustingly refer to as abortion. It has no impact on any of those things. But you know what it does have an impact on? Whether or not people take you seriously. If the first thing people are seeing from you, or one of the first things people are seeing from you, is "I hate pit bulls, we should ban them," then they're out. They're done. I know that's unfortunate that people have such a small restriction on their vision, right? That they're so tunnel visioned. But it's the truth. It's just the truth. If that's the image you put out there, they're never going to get to the point where you start talking about fiscal policy, or whether or not we should be giving money to Ukraine, or whether or not we should be supporting Israel, or whether or not we should be saving babies, or any of those kinds of things. Because the first thing that they heard from you is you want to take away their dog, right? It's unnecessary. It's stupid. It makes no difference in the long run, other than the fact that it actually does damage to your movement. And here's the second thing. It's a stupid point. It's a stupid point. It doesn't make any sense, right? We want to sit here and say that the thousands upon thousands that die from guns every year is not a problem. And by the way, I agree. Well, not that it's not a problem, of course. We all agree it's a problem, but that it's not reason to ban firearms, or to even restrict firearms with things like red flag laws and things like that. Completely agree, by the way. I'm not attacking conservatives for saying that. It's my position. In fact, I think the gun restrictions we have currently are too much. You should be able to own a pistol at the age of 18, and I see no reason why I shouldn't be able to have military grade, as they say in the media, firearm, including but not limited to something that's fully automatic, right? There's nothing in the Constitution that allows the federal government to restrict those kinds of things. So I'm not saying that those are bad arguments. However, when you say, well, pit bulls kill more than any other dog, and the entire number, according to the most aggressive numbers, the entire number of human beings in the United States of America killed every year by dogs is 50 at the max and 16 at the least. Oh yeah, but pit bulls are 3/4 of those. Let's say they're 100%. It's 50. That's such a small deal, it's not even funny. And we conservatives are the same group that want looser laws on guns, that think the nanny state oversteps its bounds when it tells us 21 to smoke a cigarette, that doesn't want the nanny state telling us whether or not we can have table salt, or whether or not we can have 24-ounce sodas. And for those who doubt me, look up Michael Bloomberg. When he tried to do that, conservatives were rioting. Rightfully so. It is not the state's right to tell you whether or not you can drink a 24-ounce soda, or have a Big Mac, or have table salt, or tell you when you're a full-fledged adult whether or not you can smoke a cigarette. It's not the state's job, okay? And yet we're going to sit here and make a big hubbub about the fact that pit bulls happen to be slightly more deadly than other breeds, which when you look at the other statistics, it is slightly. So I want to just say, if you're in the group that's making these arguments, this whole, hey, we need to ban pit bulls, all this kind of stuff, stop it. Please shut up. Or at least come on to the channel and debate me on it. I'd love to have a conversation with you. I'd completely smoke you, by the way, because your opinion's retarded. But all you're doing is doing damage to our movement by talking about something that literally does not matter. It doesn't matter. If you ban pit bulls in Nashville, Tennessee, then guess what? You're still going to be in debt. You're still going to be dealing with an overreaching federal government. You're still going to have wars that you're paying for that have nothing to do with your country. You're still going to have everything that's going on in Israel, everything that's going on with the Pope. You're still going to have people violating the Constitution. You're still going to have babies killed. You're still going to have gay marriage or gay mirage, as Doug Wilson likes to say. You're not going to change anything. You're just going to piss people off and therefore make them not vote for you. So stop it, please. Shut up. You're annoying. Just wanted to get that off my chest real quick, and perhaps I'll do a bloglet on that at some point soon. I know you guys probably don't really care very much. Anyways, oh, and by the way, just for the record, all the cities that have actually banned certain breeds of dog, they're all liberal Democrat cities. That's not a coincidence. Anywho, we have some more important things to be discussing today, some things that are not deeply stupid, including but not limited to a deeply, deeply distressing interview from one former president and likely future president, Donald J. Trump. Now, as you guys know, I am not a fan of Donald Trump. I've been rather clear on that. Oh, but what about the other guy? I don't care, okay? The other guy also sucks. Believe it or not, two things can be true at once. Biden's an idiot who's destroying the country, and Trump plans on it, okay? Like, they're both evil. The lesser of two evils, if the evils are Napoleon Bonaparte and Julius Caesar, I don't really think there's such thing as a lesser, if I'm being very honest with you, okay? But that's the position we're in. It's a position we've gotten ourselves in because we refuse to nominate good candidates. They run. Doug Burgum ran in 2024. Tim Scott ran in 2024. 2016, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Ben Carson, they all ran. 2012, Ron Paul and Mike Huckabee was 2016, but Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, they all ran. 2008, we had Fred Thompson, and we had Alan Keyes. We had Ron Paul again and Mike Huckabee again. We just never nominate them. We nominate Mitt Romney and John McCain and Donald Trump. Why? Because we, the American people, are stupid. I know people hate to hear that. They want to hear it's all the state. Well, if the people just really knew, no, they know. They're just idiots. And because of the fact that they're idiots, here we are in the situation yet again where we have two terrible options for president. And Donald Trump's recent interview with the Times, which I just called Time Magazine, but we often refer to it as the Times. But also the Times more accurately tends to refer to the New York Times, so we really shouldn't do that. His most recent interview with Time is a perfect example of that. And friends, I have to be honest with you, this and something else we're going to read today is incredibly distressing for anybody with ears to hear. And I'm not saying, so don't bring it up, please, that the solution is to vote for Biden. Biden is, first off, not even cognizant of who he is at this point. And second off, is clearly in bed with evil, wicked people who aim on destroying the country. I'm not saying Trump is bad, therefore vote Biden. I'm saying both options are terrible, and conservatives need to stop worshiping at the feet of Donald Trump like he's some kind of messiah. He's not. He's a threat to the country just as much as Biden is. In a different way than Biden is, but just as much as Biden is. Okay? That's just a fact. And we've already gone over his blasphemous statements where he retweeted things talking about him being a messiah of Israel. And we've gone over how he's the guy who's pushing forward the Abraham Accords. And we've gone over his weird, I think, nefarious relationship with the Pope. There's so many things, but we have more because you guys don't tend to listen. I'm not talking about you, my audience. I'm talking about you, the American people. So here's more. And it's deeply distressing. It's deeply distressing. Read the full transcripts of Donald Trump's interview with Time. Scrolling down. Oh, I wish I could get rid of this little, whatever this block is. It's frustrating me. Anyways, you can read our full cover story on Donald Trump here. There's a little link if you guys want. I'm going to provide links in the description. You can also read the transcript of the interviews here and full fact check here. Okay. Former President Donald Trump sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Time at his Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida on April 12th and a follow-up conversation by phone on April 27th. Over the course of the interviews, Trump discussed his agenda for a second term, which includes deporting millions of people, cutting the U.S. civil service, and intervening more directly in Justice Department prosecutions than his predecessors. Now, I do want to be clear, The deporting of millions of people is not necessarily a problem there. I don't have an issue with that at all. Cutting the U.S. civil service very much depends on what you're saying, because it's a huge block. That's U.S. civil service, as most government organizations are. The intervening, more directly in the Justice Department is definitely violating checks and balances, but this paragraph is not the thing we're talking about. It gets worse. He also discussed his thinking on other issues, including abortion, crime, trade, Ukraine, Israel, and the prospect of for political violence in this election cycle. Below is a transcript. Let me go ahead and go back up. Sorry. I don't know why I can't get rid of this block here. Below is a transcript, lightly edited for clarity, of the interviews between Trump and Time national politics reporter Eric Cortellessa. Click here to read our fact check. And again, I'll provide the link in the description so you guys can find that. Let's start with day one, January 20th, 2025. You have said that you will take a suite of aggressive actions on the border and immigration. I think that's how you say that. Suite, right? S-U-I-T-E. Anyways, Donald Trump, yes. You have vowed to Trump and on energy. Interviewer, yes, and we'll come to that certainly. You have vowed to launch the largest deportation operation in American history. Your advisors say that includes, to which Trump cuts off and says, because we have no choice. And to be fair, like I said, this particular area is not actually where I find, a problem with what Trump has said necessarily. I don't know how you accomplish this sort of thing, but obviously having 20 million illegal immigrants in your country is not sustainable. And every other country in the world seems to recognize that except for us. I don't really know why. But anyways, by the way, most countries in Europe are significantly more liberal than us. So the fact that they get it is weird. Anyways, I don't believe this is sustainable for a country. What's happening to us with probably 15 and maybe as many as 20 million by the time Biden's out. I think it's already there, but nevertheless. 20 million people, many of them from jails, many of them from prisons, many of them from mental institutions. I mean, you see what's going on in Venezuela and other countries. They're becoming a lot safer. Interviewer says, well, let's just talk. So you have said you're going to do this massive deportation operation. I want to know specifically how you plan to do it. Trump responds. So if you look back into the 1950s, Dwight Eisenhower, he's not known for that. You don't think of him that way because you see Ike, but Dwight Eisenhower was very big on illegal immigration, not coming into our country. Trump talks ridiculously, but anyways. And he did a massive deportation of people. He was doing it for a long time. He got very proficient at it. He was bringing them just to the other side of the border, and they would be back in the country within a matter of days. And then he started bringing them 3,000 miles away. The interviewer asked, what's your plan, sir? Trump says, we'll be using local law enforcement, and we will absolutely start with the criminals that are coming in. And they're coming in numbers that we've never seen before, and we don't have a new category of crime. And we do rather have a new category of crime. It's called migrant crime. It's you see it all the time. You see it in New York City where they're having fistfights with police, and far worse than that. You see it all the time, and you're seeing it in all the cities, especially the Democratic-run cities, which is a lot of the big ones, but you're seeing it in Chicago, you're seeing it in New York and LA, and getting worse in other places. Does that include using the U.S. military? So this is our first area where we have something that is deeply concerning. For those of you who don't know, let's give some context. Posse comitatus, to make a very long story short, is a principle in Western governments, including the United States, where we say law enforcement and the military cannot be the same. Okay, you cannot have the military enforcing your laws. Why? Because that's what dictatorships do. Why? Because that's a very easy way for the federal government to start using physical wartime style violence against its citizens. And the military is very much harder to check because it's the federal government, not your local city, right? Your local cop, you might be his barber. You might cook him meals, depending on if you work at a restaurant, right? You might, know his kids, go to the same school as him, right? So on and so forth. The United States military, obviously that's not necessarily the case. The United States military pulls from all across the country and answers to the federal government. Your local police officer answers to your local police chief, who answers to your local sheriff, who answers to your local mayor. And of course, there's a governor on top of him and a state legislature and so on and so forth. The military answers to the United States government, federal, right? And highest up being the commander-in-chief, i.e. the president. So posse comitatus is a very important principle in American government and indeed in any Western-style republic or democracy, but I prefer the republic which we currently have. Moving on. And if you were asked him, does that include using the U.S. military? Trump says it would. When we talk military, generally speaking, I talk National Guard. I've used the National Guard in Minneapolis. And if I didn't use it, I don't think you'd have Minneapolis standing right now because it was really bad. But I think in terms of the National Guard, but if I thought things were getting out of control, I would have no problem using the military per se. We have to have safety in our country. We have to have law and order in our country, and whichever gets us there. But I think the National Guard will do the job. You know, had Nancy Pelosi used the National Guard, you know, I offered whatever they wanted, but I often, interviewer cuts them off. You would use the military inland as well as on the border. Trump, I don't think I'd have to do that. I think the National Guard would be able to do that. If they weren't able to, notice this, if they weren't able to, then I would use the military. Notice he's distinguishing military from National Guard, so that means the United States Army is what he's talking about, okay? You know, we have different situations. We have millions of people now that we didn't have 2 years ago. Friends, that is martial law. That is a big problem. That is incredibly concerning, okay? Now, he says, sir, the Posse Comitatus Act says that you can't deploy the U.S. military against civilians. Would you override that? Now, to be fair, Trump is right with what he says here, although this interviewer is underselling what Posse Comitatus means, but I digress. Trump says, well, these aren't civilians. These are people that aren't legally in our country. This is an invasion of our country, an invasion like probably no country has ever seen before. They're coming in by the millions. I believe we have 15 million now, and I think you'll have 20 million by the time this ends. And that's bigger than almost every state. Interviewer asked, so you can see yourself using the military to address this, which is redundant because he already did. But nevertheless, Trump responds, I could see myself using the National Guard, and if necessary, I'd have to go a step further. We have to do whatever we have to do to stop the problem we have. Again, we have a major force that's forming in our country. When you see that over the last 3 weeks, 29,000 people came in from China, and they're all fighting age, and they're mostly males, yeah, you have to do what you have to do to stop crime and to stop what's taking place at the border. The interviewer asks, would that include building new migrant detention camps? Trump says we wouldn't have to do very much of that because we'll be bringing them out of the country. We're not leaving them in the country. We're bringing them out. It's been done before. Interviewer presses, will you build new ones? Trump says, and it was done by Obama in the form of jails, you know, prisons. I got blamed for that for 4 months, and then people realized that this was done by him, not me. Notice he's just not answering the question. So are you ruling out that you would build new migrant detention camps? Trump says, no. I would not rule out anything, but there wouldn't be that much of a need for them because of the fact that we're going to be moving them out. And again, this is not necessarily the largest problem, but it is still something that is deeply concerning to me. No, I would not rule out anything, but there wouldn't be that much of a need for them because of the fact that we're going to be moving them out. We're going to bring them back from where they came. I asked because your close aide and advisor, Stephen Miller, said that part of this would be to take part of what it would take to carry out this deportation operation would include new migrant detention camps. Trump responds, it's possible that we'll do it to an extent, but we shouldn't have to do very much of it because we're going to be moving them out as soon as we get to it. And we'll be obviously starting with the criminal element, and we're going to be using local police because local police know them by name, by first name, second name, and third name. I mean, they know them very well, which is the way it should remain if we're talking about law enforcement within the country. Deploying the military to the border is one thing. And of course, the National Guard sometimes is necessary. Unfortunately, I would love a perfect world where you didn't have to have any sort of military element come in and restore order. We're not at that point. But deploying the military to the border is one thing. Deploying the military inland to operate as local law enforcement in this regard is a completely separate issue that I think we need to take very seriously. Interviewer asked, how are you going to get state and local police departments to participate in this? Under what authority is the president able to do that? It's an excellent question. Trump says, well, there's a possibility that some won't want to participate and they won't partake in the riches. You know, we have to do this. This is not sustainable. This is not a sustainable problem for our country. It's a weird way to word it, but I think you guys get what he means. He's saying this is not sustainable. The problem is too large. Does that mean you would create funding incentives from the federal government for state and local police departments? For the record, this is not really a big problem. I don't have a problem with this. It could very well be, I want to give police immunity from prosecution because the liberal groups or the progressive groups, depending on what they want to be called, somewhat liberal, somewhat progressive, but they're very strong on the fact that we want to leave everybody in, I guess. I don't know. Sanctuary cities are failing all over the place, and I really believe that there's a pent-up demand to end sanctuary cities by people that were in favor of sanctuary cities because it's just not working out for the country. So by your own telling, these are new, bold, and aggressive actions you would take. Trump says, I don't think they're bold actions, which, to be fair, with the exception of his violation of posse comitatus, like I said, this is not the greatest problem that I'm getting to today. I think they're actions that are common sense, but I really believe, Eric, that they're actions that it's incredible that they've allowed so many people to come into our country, especially considering that we're unchecked and unvetted. Most of them, they're just pouring in. They're pouring in at levels that no country has ever seen before. It is an invasion of our country. And he kind of repeats the question here, but we're going to go ahead and skip that because sake of time. I want to talk to you about your plan to build the wall in just a second, but just to come back on that, so you commit to complying with all Supreme Court orders, all orders upheld by the Supreme Court. Trump says, yeah, I would do that. Sure, I have great respect for the Supreme Court. So want to give him credit where credit is due, of course. We're going to skip over the stuff with the border wall because it's just not part of the concern of this particular video. If you believe in a border wall, Trump wants to build it. If you don't, Trump wants to build it. Do with that information what you'd like. Obviously, he didn't in his first term, so I don't have a lot of faith it'll happen. Anyway, codifying the Dreamer protections. Trump says, well, a lot of other things besides that. There were a lot of bad things. Sure, they gave you money for the wall. I basically took the money from the military. As you know, I consider this an invasion of our country, and I took the money from he's going to say military, but is cut off. Let's see. My question is, what do you plan to do in the second term? Are you going to move right away on day one to direct federal funds to continue building the wall? It's still on the wall question, so we'll go ahead and skip through that. So something you said a moment ago, you said you want to protect police from prostitution. No, it's also not pertaining to what we want to talk to today. So he's going to talk about tariffs here. There's just certain things I want to skip over because they're not relevant to the to what I'm trying to say here today. Why is this up here? Get out of here. I don't care. Talk about inflation. Talk about the trade war, which actually I largely agree with Trump in regards to his trade war with China, so we're not going to see any criticism of me to him there. Come on. Got to get to. I should have had this more set up. 100% import tariff. Let's come back to Europe later. Trump says, so interviewer says, let's come back to Europe later. Trump, I said to Angela Merkel, Angela, how many Chevrolets are in the middle of Berlin? She said, none. I said, you're right about that, but we take your cars, including cars that aren't that expensive, like Volkswagen, relatively speaking. I said, do you think that's fair? She said, probably not. But until you came along, nobody ever mentioned it. So you've been critical on how, which is just important to note because there is some likelihood that if Trump is elected president, we will have spats with Europe, which is maybe not a bad thing, to be fair. But anyways, obviously I'm trying to make a certain point here, so I don't want to necessarily spend too much time on that. Sir, you've been critical of how Israel has prosecuted its war against Hamas. In a recent interview, you said that it needed to get it over with and get back to normalcy. Trump says yes. So as president, would you consider withholding American military assistance to Israel to push it to winding down its war? Trump says, okay, so I have to start just as I did inside, ask an aide to turn down their air conditioner. I don't have to go through the whole thing, but as you know, Iran was broke. Iran is the purveyor of, interviewer cuts him off, says, no, I know, but would you? And then Trump cuts him off. No, but think of the great job I did. It would have never happened. You wouldn't have had Hamas had no money. Do you know that? I do understand that, sir. I just want to know. Trump cuts off. No, but I hope it can be pointed out during my term, there were stories that Iran didn't have the money to give to any. There was very little terrorism. We had none. I had 4 years of, we had no terrorism. We didn't have a World Trade Center knocked down, which, of course, we haven't had under Biden, so I don't know why he brings that up. Bush used to say, well, we've been a safe country. I said they knocked down the World Trade Center in the middle of your term. Do you remember that one during the debate? That was a good one, but it was true, very true. But we had no terror during and we got rid of ISIS 100%, which, of course, is not true because ISIS is back. So, obviously, that's not true. Now they're starting to come back. He just contradicts himself. If you get rid of them 100%, that means they're not here anymore, right? I want to know, you said to get Israel to wind down the war, you said it needs to get it over with. How are you going to make that happen? Would you consider withholding aid? Trump says, I think that Israel has done one thing very badly, public relations. I don't think that the Israeli Defense Force or any other group should be sending out pictures every night of buildings falling down and being bombed with possibly people in those buildings every single night, which is what they do. Notice he's not answering the question. So you won't rule out withholding or conditioning aid. Trump says no. We have to be, look, there's been no president that's done what I've done for Israel. When you look at all of the things that I've done, and it starts with the Iran nuclear deal, Bibi Netanyahu begged Obama not to do that deal. I ended that deal, and if they were smart and energetic, other than trying to get Trump, they would have made a deal because they were in bad shape. They should have made a deal with Iran. They didn't prosecute that. They didn't make that deal, but I did Golan Heights. You did. Trump, nobody even thought on Golan Heights. I gave them Golan Heights. I did the embassy in Jerusalem. Jerusalem became the capital. I built the embassy. I even built the embassy. Right, Trump says, and it's a beautiful embassy for a lot less money than anybody ever thought possible. And you've heard that, but there's been no president that's done what I've done in Israel. And it's interesting, the people of Israel appreciate it. I have like a 98%. I have the highest approval numbers. Do you know who doesn't have a high approval rating right now in Israel, though? Trump says Bibi. Do you think it's time for him to go? And, of course, this is going to talk a little bit on the politics. Why would I want to reference this particular part? Well, because part of the thing I've been warning you guys about with Trump, and this is the second thing that is deeply distressing to me in this, is we consistently talk about on this channel the link between global religious government and the Holy Land, right? Now, and I've referenced for you guys numerous times the 1990s deal that was proposed by the Vatican to, at the time, Prime Minister Shimon Peres, where they said you should half the city of Jerusalem, right? You should take West Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel, East Jerusalem to be the capital of Palestine, the old city internationalized belonging to the Vatican. And I always point out how that deal, for the most part, with the exception of Jerusalem being under the control of Israel itself, was pushed, as far as the land is concerned, was pushed by the Trump administration towards the end of his term, right? I've also pointed out to you guys numerous times how we have this backdoor deal that Donald Trump had, or backdoor conversation, rather, that Donald Trump had with the Pope back in 2017. We still don't have a transcript for. It's two world leaders talking to each other, and we don't have a transcript for it. And I've talked to you about the Pope's push to have a international United Nations of Religions, quote unquote, which he aims to head, and which, surprise, surprise, was originally suggested to him by that same former Prime Minister Shimon Peres, this time operating in capacity as president of Israel back in 2014, right? So we always talk about this whole, like, oh, the temple, is that a sign of the end times? Oh, peace in the Middle East, is that a sign of the end times somehow? Is the Abraham Accords, all this stuff, sign of the end times? And I'm trying to tell you guys, whether or not it is, whether or not you hold to that premillennial, post-rapture, pre-rapture, whatever, I don't care, okay? Whether or not you hold to that position, who is the person making deals with the Vatican, making deals with Israel, using his influence to get Israel to do what he wants them to do, trying to create a two-state solution, trying to build rapport with Israel in such a way that they call him Messiah? Who is that person? It's not Joe Biden or any other leader in Europe or Canada or the West in general. It's Donald J. Trump. And I find it incredibly weird that so many of these conservatives that I talk to, they're so gung-ho on this is the way the end times is going to go. With the third temple is going to be something that leads to the end times, and the two-state solution and the making of peace and the 7-year covenant and all this other kind of stuff, right? And they push that as a narrative that's like the Antichrist is going to do this, and this is how we're going to know we're getting into the end times. And then a politician starts doing those things with clearly nefarious motives, okay? Because whether or not you are a post-millennialist or a premillennialist or an atheist, it doesn't matter. It's obvious to everybody with a brain that we should not have an international organization owning the old city and existing in such a way that it actually has power over all the religions of the world, the same way that the United Nations does, and even more so is trying to get, because remember, Antonio Gutierrez has been quite frank. He wants a United Nations 2.0 one with teeth. So the Pope here and the former president of Israel, trying to build this United Nations of religions, internationalize the old city. Who's actually pushing that plan forward? This plan that so many other people associate with Antichrist stuff. It's Donald Trump. And whether you believe that that is sign of Antichrist stuff is not the point, because again, you don't need to believe that to understand a United Nations of religions led by the Pope is a problem. Okay? An international body telling your local church what it can and cannot do, in the same way that an international body telling your country what it can and cannot do, is a problem. And who is the guy pushing that? Who is the guy buddy-buddy with the Pope? Who is the guy using his influence to demand Israel do what he wants them to do in a war, by the way? He's not ruling it out. In a war, by the way, which was started precisely because of a threat to the Al-Aqsa status quo, according to Hamas. Watch last week's episode if you don't believe me, okay? Who's the one doing those things? It's not Biden. It wasn't Obama or Bush or Clinton. It's Donald Trump. But everybody's just blind to it. And I don't understand that. I don't get why you guys don't see that there's only one politician in the United States of America that is interested in working with these multinational globalist organizations, and it's the quote-unquote anti-globalist guy. He's the one who works with the Pope. He's the one who works with the UN. He's the one who pushes these ideas. He's the one who pushed the Abraham Accords. So what is it that causes everybody to say, in the abstract, this is Antichrist stuff, but in the specific, I'm going to vote for that guy because the opposite is Biden? Doesn't make any sense. That makes absolutely no sense. Are you even hearing yourself? It's a problem. And again, if you say, well, I'm a post-millennialist, none of that matters, it's still a problem. Because I'm sure the post-mill guys agree that the UN is a problem. I'm sure that they agree that NATO is a problem, that the North American Union has become a problem, the European Union has become a problem, the World Alliance of Religions for Peace is a problem, and the World Evangelical Coalition is a problem, and the World Council of Churches is a problem. The World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, they're problems, right? So you don't have to buy into that. This is what the Antichrist is going to do idea in order to agree that these multinational organizations are problems. And if you agree that they're problems, why do you not pay attention to the fact that the person who is pushing them is Donald Trump and has always been Donald Trump? Biden's never done it. And again, that's not an endorsement of Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a tool. Joe Biden is a completely worthless politician. He was evil before he was senile, and now he's senile. Okay, so I'm not saying vote for Biden. In fact, I think it's a sin to vote for Biden in my personal religious convictions. If I'm being very frank with you. But the threat you're looking for, okay, is not Biden, actually. It's Donald Trump. Biden's a different kind of threat. Anyways, moving on. I'm short on time, and there's other deeply concerning things that Trump says here as well. I'm going to skip over the stuff with Benjamin Netanyahu because it's just his personal opinion on Benjamin Netanyahu. It doesn't matter. Just going ahead and moving forward. Let's see. Oh, here, actually, I don't want to skip this part. Okay. So they asked the question, do you think an outcome of that war between Israel and Hamas should be a two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians? This just goes into the rant I was just giving. Trump says most people thought it was going to be a two-state solution. I'm not sure a two-state solution anymore is going to work. Now, bear in mind, when he says that, his peace deal was rejected by the Palestinians. His peace deal did not include the partition of Jerusalem that the Vatican included in the 90s. So while he is saying this now, it is important to note that we can see the trajectory of where this is going, and the logical conclusion, if you do want peace, is to reinstate that old partition of Jerusalem. So that's a little bit of my own speculation, but read between the lines. Everybody was talking about two states. Even when I was there, I was saying, what do you like here? Do you like two states? Now people are going back to, it depends where you are. Every day it changes now. If Israel's making progress, they don't want two states. They want everything. And if Israel's not making progress, sometimes they talk about two-state solution. Two-state solutions seem to be the idea that people liked most, the policy, or the idea that people liked above. Do you like it? The interviewer asks. Trump says, it depends when. There was a time when I thought two states could work. Now I think two states is going to be very, very tough. I think it's going to be much tougher to get. I also think you have fewer people that like the idea. You had a lot of people that liked the idea 4 years ago. Today, you have fewer people that like the idea. Then interviewer says, you said, Trump cuts him off. He says, there may not be another idea. You know, there are people to say that the situation is one of the toughest to settle. Yeah, absolutely, says the interviewer. Trump responds, because children grow up and they're taught to hate Jewish people at a level that nobody thought was possible. And I had a friend, very good friend, Sheldon Adelson, who felt that it was impossible to make a deal because the level of hatred was so great. And I think it was much more so on one side than the other, which is true, to be fair. But the level of hatred of Jewish people was so great and taught from the time that they were in kindergarten and before. He felt that, and he was a great deal maker. He was a very rich man. He was a rich man because of his ability to make deals, and he loved Israel more than anything else. He loved Israel, and he wanted to protect Israel, and he felt that it was impossible to make a deal because of the level of hatred. Trump says, do you feel that way now? Trump says, I disagreed with it, but so far he hasn't been wrong. He does say, let's see, I believe he says he would protect Israel he says, they ask, long story short, will you get into Israel's side if they go to war with Iran? He says, yeah, I will protect Israel. So that is interesting to note. A lot of you guys want to talk about, oh, well, we want to be anti-war. World War III is happening. Trump is not any different on that regard. Now, this is very interesting because it's a lie, the thing I'm about to read to you, which the reason I'm reading it to you is because I want you to know it's a lie. It's because I want you to know the kind of personality that we're dealing with, okay? It was only about 4 weeks ago, that Donald Trump and Kari Lake both were harshly critical of Arizona's quote-unquote abortion ban. I say quote-unquote because I have come to be convinced by a good friend of mine, many of you may know, but I won't drop his name here because I don't know if you would know him nevertheless. But a good friend of mine has convinced me that abortion is a euphemism and that it shan't be used. We should say feticide, infanticide, murder of the unborn, something of those along those lines. And I've become convinced that he's right, actually, that we shouldn't use euphemistic language to refer to a veritable Holocaust on the unborn. But that's what they refer to it as, quote unquote, an abortion ban, right? So a ban on infanticide. And Trump and Kari Lake, who's a Arizona politician, were very critical of this infanticide ban. Said that it was not the right move, that it was going to cause them to lose elections, so on and so forth, right? And many other conservative, quote unquote, pundits have said the same. But what Trump's about to say in this Time interview, mere weeks after he was all over Truth Social talking about how you shouldn't do that, he's now going to change his tune. Mere weeks later. So hear this. You came out this week and said that abortion should be left to the states, and you said you won't sign a federal ban. So just to be clear, you will veto any bill that imposes any federal restrictions on abortion. Trump said you don't need a federal ban. We just got out of the federal. You know, if you go back on Roe v. Wade was all about, it wasn't about abortion so much as bringing it back to the states. So the states would negotiate deals. Florida is going to be different from Georgia, and Georgia is going to be different from other places. That's what's happening right now. It's very interesting. But remember this, every legal scholar for 53 years said that the issue is a state issue from a legal standpoint. It's starting to work out that way. And what's happening is people starting to get into the 15 weeks and now 5 weeks or 6 weeks, and they're getting started getting into, time periods. They started all of a sudden deciding what abortion was going to be. Excuse me. People want to know whether you would veto a bill if it came to your desk. That would impose any federal restrictions. This is really important to a lot of voters. Trump says, but you have to remember this, there will never be that chance because it won't happen. You're never going to get 60 votes. You're not going to have it for many, many years, whether it be a Democrat or Republican. Right now, it's essentially 50-50. I think we have a chance to pick up a couple, but a couple means we're at 51 or 52. There's a long ways to go. So it's not going to happen because you won't have that, okay? But with all that being said, it's all about the states. It's about states' rights. States' rights. States are going to make their own determination. So where's the lie here I was talking about? Well, he was just saying Arizona made the wrong move. Now he's saying it's a states' rights issue, right? So there's obvious lies here that I think that we need to address. You know what? That's taking tremendous pressure off everybody, but it was ill-defined. And to be honest, a lot of Republicans didn't know how to talk about the issue. The issue never affected me. Just to be clear, then, you won't commit to vetoing the bill if there's a federal abortion restrictions. He says, I won't have to commit because number one, it'll never happen. Number two, it's about states' rights. You don't want to go back into the federal government. This was all about getting out of the federal government. And that was done, Eric, because this issue has been simplified greatly over the last 1 week. This is about, and was originally about, getting out of the federal government. The last issue you want to do is go back into the federal government, and the states are just working their way through it. Look at Ohio. Ohio passed something that people are a little surprised at. Kansas, places are that are conservative and big Trump states. Ohio and way up Kansas, all these states, they pass laws that they want to pass. It's about states' rights. Let's see. The Life of Conception Act would grant full legal rights to embryos, included in their 2025 budget proposal. Is that your position? Trump said, I'm leaving everything up to the states. Would you veto the bill? He said, I don't have to do anything about vetoes because we now have it back to the states. Trump says, so do you think women should be able to get the abortion pill? And I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly. I'm sorry. Mifepristone. Trump says, well, I have an opinion on that, but I'm not going to explain. I'm not going to say it yet. But I have a pretty strong view on that, and I'll be releasing it probably over the next week. He has not yet. The guy pushes, says, this is a big question, Mr. President, because your allies have called for enforcement of the Comstock Act, which prohibits the mailing of drugs used for abortion by mail. The Biden administration justice does not enforce it. Would your Department of Justice enforce it? He says, I'll be making a statement on that over the next 14 days. Trump says, yeah, I have a big statement on that. I feel very strongly about it. I actually think it's a very important issue. He has asked the question, are you comfortable if states decide to punish women who access abortions after the procedure is banned? He says, are you talking about number of weeks? He says, yeah, let's say there's a 15-week ban. Trump says, again, that's going to be, I don't have to be comfortable or uncomfortable. That's the states that are going to make that decision. The states are going to have to be comfortable or uncomfortable, not me. Again, it was mere weeks ago that he was saying that Arizona was making the wrong choice for having a blanket infanticide ban. Okay, and now he's changing his tune just a couple of days later when he's having this time interview. Let's see. So we already got that one. Let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so they asked him, how do you plan to vote? They're talking about his state, which is Florida. That's the state he lives in. He says, how do you plan to vote in the state's abortion referendum this November that would overturn DeSantis' 6-week ban? Trump says, well, I said I thought 6 weeks was too severe. So you have a little bit of honesty here as far as how he would vote in his own state election. So when those of you guys want to say, well, Trump is an advocate for life. No, he's not. He says, well, I said I thought 6 weeks is too severe. So President Donald J. Trump, you've heard it here first, believes a 6-week ban, and of course anything more restrictive, is too severe of a ban on infanticide. It's his words, not mine. Take it up with him. All right, moving forward, we have much to get to, and I'm already hitting an hour. Man, I haven't even gotten to the second article. Let's see. Got something on violent crime that doesn't pertain to what we're trying to talk about today. So, interviewer asks, if elected, going on to the Department of Justice, if elected, would you instruct Attorney General to prosecute the state officials who are prosecuting you, like Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis? Trump says, well, we're going to look at a lot of things like they're looking. What they've done is a terrible thing. No, I don't want to do that. I was not happy looking at Clinton. I was not happy. I think it's a terrible thing. But unfortunately, what they've done is they've lifted up the lid, and what they've done to me is incredible over nothing. Well, you said Alvin Bragg should be prosecuted. Would you instruct your attorney general to prosecute him? He says, when did I say Alvin Bragg should be prosecuted? Interviewer says, it was a rally. Trump says, I don't think I said that. No. Interviewer says, I can pull it up. Trump says, no. So just to be clear, you wouldn't instruct your attorney general to prosecute Alvin Bragg. We're going to have great retribution through success. We're going to make our country successful again. Our retribution is going to be through the success of our country. Would you fire a U.S. attorney who didn't prosecute someone you ordered him to, him or her? Depends on the situation, Trump says. So you might. It would depend on the situation, Trump says. Okay, so, sir, you said that you would appoint a real special prosecutor to go after Biden and his family. Trump says, well, it depends what happens with the Supreme Court. Look, a president should have immunity. That includes Biden. Which, to be fair, this is actually, give Trump credit where credit is due. He's being consistent here. If they've ruled that they don't have immunity, Biden, probably nothing to do with me. He should be prosecuted for 20 different acts because he's created such. You take a look at not only his criminal acts of taking a lot of money and being a Manchurian candidate, but at what happened. Look at what happened in Afghanistan. Look at what happened throughout the world. Look at what happened with him allowing Russia to do that with Ukraine. So again, it's another one of those things people want to talk about. Oh, he'll make peace in Russia. He does not Putin enemy. That's obviously not true. That would never happen with me, and it didn't happen. I knew Putin very well. President Trump isn't going after your political opponents, what they do in a banana republic. Trump says, that's what's happening now. Yeah. Guy says, well, okay. And then Trump says, no, Eric, that's what's happening now. I've got to be on Monday. In fact, we're doing this today because Monday was a little bit tougher because I have to be in a criminal court on Monday. Over a non-criminal case. It's not even a criminal case. And it's like I said, if you go to Andy McCarthy or if you go to Jonathan Turley, two real experts, or if you go to all the legal scholars that wrote, they say this isn't even a criminal case. And I have a judge who's more conflicted than any judge anyone's ever seen. He's a mean guy who hates Trump. You take a look at what's going on there. You just asked me, you just asked me a question and they're doing that to me. Guy says, well, sir, just to be clear, Trump says, wait a minute, I haven't had a chance to do it to them. I would be inclined not to do it. He says, let me repeat that because I said that terribly. I would be inclined not to do it. I don't want to do it to them, but a lot of that's going to have to do with the Supreme Court. Look, we are going in another 2 weeks to the Supreme Court, and they're going to make a ruling on presidential immunity. If they said that a president doesn't get immunity, then Biden, I am sure, will be prosecuted for all of his crimes because he committed many crimes. So in other words, he's saying, if the Supreme Court doesn't rule in my favor, then yes, the door is open to prosecuting Biden for his crimes. So to prosecuting political opponents, in other words. And this is a weird issue because Biden has committed crimes, but also opening the door to prosecuting your political opponents is bad. So I'm not going to definitively come down on one side of this issue or the other because I haven't thought through it all myself, if I'm being honest. But just to be clear, what Trump is saying is he would at least have the door open to prosecuting Biden if the Supreme Court did not rule in his favor in regards to presidential immunity. If they say, on the other hand, that a president has immunity, then I happen to think a president has to have immunity because otherwise it's going to be a ceremonial position. But Biden has done so many things so badly, and I'm not even talking overt crime. I'm talking about the border, allowing all of the death and destruction at the border, allowing all of this stuff. If a president doesn't have immunity. So when you ask me that question, it depends on what the Supreme Court does. So Trump says, well, on that question, questioner says, well, on that question, your lawyer, John Sauer, argued in court recently that if you, as president, ordered a Navy SEAL team to assassinate a political rival, you shouldn't be prosecuted. Do you agree with your lawyer? Trump says, well, I understood it differently. I thought it was a political rival from another country. I think I understood it differently, and I'm not sure. And John Sauer also said that first you go through an impeachment, and then you make the determination based on impeachment. But a president, if you don't have immunity from prosecution, fairly strong immunity from prosecution. Now, if you do something just overtly very bad and very stupid, that's a different situation. That may be one of those cases. So there was a little bit of a word salad, but he did essentially say, well, yes, if a president doesn't have immunity and has done something that's particularly bad, I do think that you should not be, that it is on the table to assassinate a political rival. So again, do with that what you will. Now, there is an element that's much farther down that I want to speak about here. And it is this quote, but since it's so much further down, I want to actually read it from another article. Trump says, I think a lot of people like it when he floats the idea of being a dictator. And so to recap the problems I've had so far, number one, Trump is willing to violate posse comitatus to solve the border issue, having the military operate inland. Number two, Trump is willing to push forward this agenda that so many pre-mills like to tell me is Antichrist level with Israel. Number three, Trump does believe it is on the table to prosecute your political rivals. Number four, as long as the Supreme Court doesn't rule in his favor, it's an important caveat. Number four, Trump is blatantly lying about his position on abortion, and then in a moment of honesty is telling you that he actually does believe a 6-week ban in infanticide is too strict, so he's not a pro-lifer. And then number five, and finally, and here we have it. Oh, number five in the recap, actually. This will be the sixth thing. Number five in the recap, he did say that if there is no immunity and also the political rival has done something particularly bad, he does believe it is on the board that that you could kill a political rival. At least as I understood it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But here's the real kicker here. Trump says a lot of people like it when he floats the idea of being a dictator. So this article is from the Boston Herald, and it reads thusly. People don't seem to mind the idea of former President Donald Trump acting as a dictator, he told Time magazine in an interview that drew swift rebuke from the Biden-Harris campaign. In a wide-ranging interview given to the magazine and shared by the 45th president Tuesday morning via his Truth social media platform, Trump was asked to explain comments he made to Fox News host Sean Hannity in which the former president said he would become a dictator on the first day of office. Now, let me repeat that real quick. Trump was asked to explain comments he made to Fox News host Sean Hannity, in which the former president said he would become a dictator on his first day in office. Trump's response, a lot of people like it, he reportedly told the Times. A lot of people like it. Okay? Now, to read you the exact quote here from the Time magazine. So the exact quote he says is, I said, what does he have it here? He, speaking of Sean Hannity, said, do you want to be a dictator? I said, only for one day. I want to close at the border and I want to drill, baby, drill. Then I said, after that I never need to be a dictator. That was done. That was said sarcastically, and I meant it as a joke. So to be fair, he does specify that he does try to say that he's meaning that as a joke. But, let me see. Sorry, there's another quote here I want to make sure I find so that I can give it to you guys. He says, I wanted to be for one day. You know why? Because we have an incompetent. So he's now reneging on the idea that he thought this was a joke. I wanted to be for one day. You know why? Because we have an incompetent fool that's allowing people to come into our country. We have an incompetent fool that drove energy prices so high over such a short period of time. And by the way, he's gone to a lot of my policies now. But the day after the election, if they win, there won't be any more oil. Then when the interviewer responds, but you see why so many Americans see language like that, dictator for a day, suspending the Constitution, and Trump cuts him off and says, I think a lot of people like it. Interviewer says, but you see why they see that as contrary to our most cherished democratic principles. And Trump says, no, I think the press does, not because they don't understand it. They understand it as well as you do, as well as anybody else does. So, yeah. He originally says it's a joke, but then he says, no, actually, there's some seriousness behind it because they've done all these things. And then when he says, well, you understand why people would see that as a violation of the Constitution, he says, no, actually, I think that some people actually like the idea, and I think it's the media that thinks it's a violation of our democratic principles. Now, back to this article, because I was just reading you now the quote that I had from the Time magazine article. As might be expected, President Joe Biden's re-election team was quick to note the revelations contained in the interview and respond. Not since the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today because of Donald Trump. And I don't think the Biden administration has any room to be talking there, but nevertheless, that is what they say. Trump is willing to throw away the very idea of America to put himself in power. Biden-Harris 2024 spokesperson James Singer said in a statement. In his own words, he's promising to rule as a dictator on one day, use the military against the American people, which he is. There's caveats there. Certainly, the Biden-Harris campaign is trying to push their own agenda. There's no doubt about that. But he did say that. He did say he wants to use the United States military inland if it's necessary to enforce the law. Okay, that's an important thing to talk about. Punish those who stand against him, condone violence done on his behalf, which that's not necessarily true. And put his own revenge and retribution ahead of what is best for America. Bottom line, Trump is a danger to the Constitution and threat to our democracy, end quote, Singer said. And again, obviously, they themselves are spinning this. We're obviously trying to give you the full context here, right? But the Biden-Harris campaign is not 100% wrong in what they're saying. And here's another thing. They're overblowing it a little bit, I think. But it is a comment worthy of note. In the Time article, Eric asks, Mr. President, in our last conversation, you said you weren't worried about political violence in connection with the November election. I think we're going to win and there won't be violence. What if you don't win, sir? Trump responds, well, I do think we're going to win. We're way ahead. I don't think they'll be able to do things that they did the last time, which were horrible, absolutely horrible. So many different things they did, which were in total violation of what was supposed to be happening. And you know that, and everybody knows that. We can recite them, go down a list that would be in arms long. But I don't think we're going to have that. I think we're going to win. And if we don't win, it depends. It always depends on the fairness of an election. So he's asked a question about violence on his behalf. And he says, it depends. If you cut through all the fluff where he's saying, well, I don't think it matters. I think we're going to win. He says, it always depends on the fairness of the election. I don't believe they'll be able to do the things they did last time. I don't think they'll be able to get away with it. And if that's the case, we're going to win in record-setting fashion. So, again, if you cut through the fluff, what Trump just said is whether or not, do you think there'll be violence after the... And to be fair, he didn't say he would use the violence. Again, we want to be honest about it. He didn't say he would use political violence, but he did say that it depends, whether or not there will be violence very much depends on what he considers to be the fairness of the election. Okay? So, I mean, do with that information what you may. The left is obviously running with it in a way they shouldn't be. The right is, I think, neglecting to point out how brutal it could actually be. It's certainly a problematic statement to make. But anyways, I don't know. I don't like it. I'll put it that way. So Trump is talking about dictatorial power, if only for a day. He says it's a joke, but then he says that it's legit. He is saying that it's possible there could be violence on his behalf. He's saying that he believes if there's no political immunity, he could prosecute his political rivals. And he's saying that he is not against using the United States military inland. So yeah, I'm deeply concerned with this man and with his ability to run the country. Now, am I more concerned with him than I am with Joe Biden? To be honest with you, I won't be voting for either this election cycle. I'm going to be voting probably Constitution Party. I thought Robert Kennedy for a minute. Turns out Robert Kennedy is not a viable candidate if you're a conservative. He unfortunately is a supporter of infanticide, a supporter of homosexual mirage, supporter of plenty of other things that environmental tyranny, plenty of other things I just can't get down with. So I won't be voting for Robert Kennedy either, even though I thought that's what I was going to be doing. So I'm probably going to vote Constitution Party. I'll be one of the 4 who does that. I do believe it is your civic duty as a citizen in a republic to vote. But yeah, we're kind of out of a lot of the options here. There was other stuff I wanted to get to today, but we're already an hour and 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go ahead and do that. So hopefully, I'm not going to promise anything, but hopefully tomorrow we are going to be doing a Watchdog special report on the recent Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which is an act that is absolutely a threat to free speech in America, but which is also being misrepresented by its opponents. Like, 2 things can be true at once, right? And in the case of this particular act, it is true that it is a threat to free speech in America. And in fact, very many Jewish leaders in America, some on the left, some on the right, have come out against this act precisely for that reason. To name a couple of the Jewish speakers who have come out against this act, Andrew Klavan is obviously a Jewish Christian, very liberal Christian, but nevertheless. Ben Shapiro has come out against it. I believe Dr. Michael Brown had come out against it, if I remember correctly. Could be wrong about that. And on the left side of things, there was a representative, I can't remember his name, I think Jerry Nadler, who had come out against it, as well as others. So both left and right Jewish people are even coming. And by the way, yours truly, coming out saying that this is a threat to free speech. It's a violation of the First Amendment. And it is, by the way. It is also being misrepresented in that what people are saying it does and what it actually does are 2 different things. What it actually does is a violation of the First Amendment, but it is not the same level of what people are saying it does, right? So hopefully we will have a special report for you guys on that tomorrow. I plan on reading the entire Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. We're in a weird spot here in American history where there is a growing trend of anti-Semitism in this country, and it's deeply concerning to me for obvious reasons. At the same time, there is a growing trend on the side of those who are fighting against anti-Semitism of broadening the definition to such an extent that, much like racist and fascist in the modern day, it becomes a completely useless word, which we'll talk about in this special report, right? But, and there's so many other special reports I want to get to. So, but hopefully I'll be doing this one tomorrow. Suffice it to say, it is true that people should not hate Jews. And it is also true that saying things like the Jews killed Jesus is not anti-Semitic. It is true that people should not have ethnic hatreds. And it is also true that being opposed to Israel, which tends to be something on the left that I don't support anyway. I am actually quite nationalistic for all nations. But nevertheless, those who are against me, who are not Zionist in that regard, they're not racist for having done so, right? So we're in a weird spot where people like myself who are trying to stick to the actual definition of the word are being ping-ponged between 2 sides. A side on the right that looks at any criticism of Judaism or Israel as anti-Semitism, which is weird that that's on the right, right? Because it sounds like a very leftist thing to do. And to be fair, it's not a conservative thing. So while they're on the right politically, It's not a right-wing thing, I think. And on the other side, we have this group of people who are so utterly anti-Semitic, and some of them are actually kind of right perpendicular, right? There's a lot of people on the right wing who are genuine white supremacists. That is a thing. It's becoming more popular. I didn't believe it for quite some time, if I'm being honest with you, but there are guys like Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate and Candace Owens and so on and so forth, who are definitely they're on the right wing, quote unquote, and they are definitely anti-Semitic. And in the case of Nick Fuentes, definitely racist against non-white people as well. Which of course on the left wing, there's other that's the whole problem, right? There's so many groups that are truly prejudiced, not prejudiced. The left. Oh, I just went on a big rant earlier today about the Civil War, right? Oh, you think General Lee was a good general? You must be a racist. You think that Israel is a legitimate state? You must be a racist. Or on the flip side of that, you think that Judaism is a false religion? You must be a racist. And obviously that definition of racism is nonsense, right? It's not a definition of racism at all. It's just a dog whistle to try and slap people with a title that you think destroys them, right? The unfortunate consequence of the misuse of language in that regard is that genuine racism is a lot more popular now. Genuine hatred of Arab and Muslim peoples, genuine hatred of white peoples on the side of the left, genuine hatred of Jewish people on all sides, genuine hatred of Russian people, right? Because of the demonizing of Vladimir Putin. Which, by the way, I don't support Putin. I think history is going to remember him a lot more fondly than we think. But he is a dictator. He does kill his political rivals. He's certainly not somebody I would want to run my own country. So it's another area where both sides are full of crap. You know what I mean? But anyways, my point is we're in a weird spot in regards to this word anti-Semitism, and we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Lord willing. I'm not promising anything, but my plan is to have a special report on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act tomorrow. So that's pretty much all I got. I recognize some of you guys may not agree with where I'm coming from here, but what can I say? It's my show, and I'm going to say what I want. So I hope you guys liked this. If you did, please remember to like and share the video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so, with the bell to get notified every time we go live. Go subscribe to our Rumble account just in case we get taken down over here. Follow us on various social media platforms: Twitter, Truth Social, Minds, MeWe, Facebook, etc. If you want to support us, you can support monthly via the Patreon, or you can support one time via the PayPal. Certainly appreciate anybody who is supporting us, because I can guarantee you this, and I don't say this as a brag. I described myself as a traditionalist Burkean conservative earlier. I'm probably the only newscaster in the world who describes himself that way. I'm exaggerating a little bit because there's obviously going to be other small channels like this one, but you're certainly not finding that elsewhere, right? And you're certainly not finding the emphasis on global politics, on the state of Israel, on global international organizations like the UN and the World Alliance for Religions for Peace. You're not finding that elsewhere. So if you like that, then please do consider supporting the work that we do here, so that we can continue to give you this kind of information and even do a better job at it. This is the Synagogue News, so we do want to remind you to think like Neanderthals. I want to remind you guys to be vigilant, of course, and want to ask you guys the question, as we do: in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise? Shalom.